week. I hope everyone's had a great week. I want to create this video because there is this interesting Substack post by Michael Easter. He's a really great author. I really enjoy his content and his books. The Comfort Crisis is a great one, a great read. Just check it out. But he also has this great Substack called 2%, which is based around a lot of the ideas he has regarding what he's written about in his books. Truly just great stuff. And he had this post today called Big Debate: Does Exercise Lead to Weight Loss? And I found this post particularly interesting because it's actually something that I have written about twice at this point. So this is free on his blog. The Monday posts are always free for everyone to read. You can go to his 2% TWOPCT.com and find this and read this for yourself. He also has a great Spotify of him reading the blog posts. If you don't want to read it, you can listen to him read it. But it's a really good post summarizing the idea as to whether exercise leads to greater weight loss or not. And like I said, I've written about this twice in much greater detail than what Michael has done here. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about the topic because I think it's relevant. And for those that don't want to read very long posts, maybe a short video overview of this would be good for you. The first post I wrote on this was called Exercise is Pointless, So Why Do It? And this is really, I wrote this post after I read his Dr. Herman Ponzer's book called Burn. And another good read. But it's basically all about what is called the constrained model of energy expenditure. And this little diagram here from one of Dr. Ponzer's papers explains the whole idea behind burn. And burn is referring to caloric burn. So we think of, in terms of exercise, the more exercises you do, the more total calories you burn. So this is what we usually think of when we think of exercise and caloric expenditure. You exercise more, you burn more calories, and that just continually adds up. So the more you exercise, the more calories you're going to burn. But Dr. Ponzer argues that our metabolism is more constrained. For a little bit, we burn more. The more physical activity you do, the more calories you burn, but that actually levels off at some point, and it doesn't go up until infinity. And so you can't just keep on adding exercise and it's going to be an additive effect. Instead, it levels off. And the reason it levels off is because it starts to steal caloric expenditure from other bodily functions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So basically there's a cap, right? And then not so much Dr. Ponzer himself, but the media basically took this and said, the quote unquote, the media, right? But I started to see a lot of people posting and arguing and whatnot, as they would, about how exercise is pointless, right? Why do exercise if it's not going to actually burn more calories? And so I take offense to that because if you don't know me, then I'm a huge fan of exercise. And I'll say up front that I do think that exercise can both directly and also indirectly lead to greater weight loss if that is your goal. And some of that has to do with energy expenditure, burning more calories throughout the day. And some of it has to do with the other benefits that exercise has on us in a number of other ways that eventually leads to greater weight loss. This whole model is actually based on a study that Dr. Ponzer did on a group of hunter-gatherer called the Hadza. So the Hadza is a hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa, and he basically stuck a bunch of accelerometers on these hunter-gatherers and measured their energy expenditure. And they found that on average, the Hadza men, they walked 12.4 kilometers a day or 7.7 miles per day, while Hadza women walked on average about 6.2 kilometers a day or about 3.8 miles per day, which is quite a bit, right? It's definitely far more physical activity than the average Westerner gets. So we know that in the US, we take on average 7,431 steps per day. Women take around 5,756 steps per day. That translates into kilometers and miles. Then walking 5.6 kilometers per day or 3.4 miles per day, and women walking around 4.3 kilometers per day or 2.6 kilometers a day. So the Hadza men are taking and women are taking more steps than US men and women and walking quite a bit more. Despite all that, Ponzer took a look at their energy expenditure data for the Hadza. And the assumption would be that if this additive model is correct, that they would burn far more calories than the average Westerner or US person. But that didn't actually happen. If you look at his data here, this is just mapping body mass to total daily energy expenditure. This solid gray line here is the trend line for the men, and the dashed line is the trend line for the women. And that the Hadza men are just slightly above the regular, what this market here basically refers to Western societies, modern societies, just slightly above the trend line for Western societies. And the Hadza women are just actually slightly below the trend line for Western societies. And so they didn't really burn that many more calories. And in some cases, the women burn less calories than modern or the Western population, which is basically, why is that, right? How could they doing a lot more physical activity, but they're not burning that any more calories? So what Ponzer proposes here is that as your physical activity goes up, it eats into some non-essential and eventually some essential caloric energy expenditure. So what is non-essential caloric expenditure? So non-essential caloric expenditure is what we get when we're like sedentary. We get a lot more inflammation. We have a lot more stress. We have excess sex hormone reproduction, etc. So because we're not physically active, we have actually a lot of effects on the body that result in additional energy expenditure that is promoting not such good things. Excess inflammation, excess stress, excess sex hormones these are all bad things. Right? As we start to become active, this starts to level out. So it eats into this non-essential energy expenditure of these negative things. So inflammation starts to go down, stress starts to go down, and excess sex hormone reproduction starts to go down. It starts to level out to normal levels. And then that's why we start to see this decrease in morbidity and mortality as you become more physically active. But then as you start to get to extreme levels of physical activity, you can see it now is starting to eat into essential stuff. And this is well known, right? When we get to extreme levels of energy expenditure and we're not having enough calories coming in, then we start to see a downregulation of the immune system. We start to see not proper stress relaxation balance. We start to see a downregulation of sex hormone production below levels that are normal. And you start to see a slight increase in morbidity and mortality because we're eating away at essential energy expenditure, and some of the functions in the body start to shut down. And this is well documented, right? But I want to draw your attention back to something else that's a little odd here, right? This farming population, right? Why is the farming population here, these three blue dots, actually above the trend line for Western society and above the Hadza? And also for the females, the same here, right? Why are they above? That was curious to me, and not something that Ponzer addressed in his book Burn, but this data is from one of his papers. And one of the things that I wanted to point out here is that I think that potentially the Hadza are falling into this area here, where they're starting to eat into essential or just on the borderline of eating into essential energy expenditure, because they're hunter-gatherers. They have to work to get their food. They don't have unlimited access to food, like the Western societies do. So their calories are mostly capped. So they're expending a lot of energy trying to find calories, and they don't get a lot of calories in return for all that energy expenditure because, again, they're eating whole natural foods. They're not like calorically dense foods. These are like fruits and vegetables and animal proteins. And right, the most calorically dense thing that they possibly get is honey. And they will do some extreme things to get honey if you ever read about Hadza and honey. But most part, like they're expending a whole bunch of energy and they're getting return for foods that are not very energy dense. And they're like falling into this, like in between this active and extreme situation because their caloric intake is low. So their energy expenditures is essentially capped by how much energy they actually have access to. This is not the situation that a lot of Western societies find us in. And you can make an argument here that if you're a farming population, you do a lot of physical labor, but you might also have access to adequate nutrition and calories to replenish, to make up for all that. The energy expenditure is more additive in these populations because they have access to the energy to replace all the calories that they're burning from physical activity. So my frame of reference here is that it's not that the additive model doesn't exist. It does exist, but it's also dependent on how many calories you have access to. So if you're expending a lot of energy and you're not replenishing all that energy with enough calories, you're going to sit below this trend line. It's going to look like you're doing a whole bunch of work, but you're not actually burning a lot of calories because the body doesn't have the calories to burn and is going to start to eat into your essential energy expenditure to make up for that and downregulate things. However, if you're like these farmers and you're expending a lot of energy and you do have access to a lot of calories, enough calories to replenish what you're burning, then I think that you get this more additive model comes into play, right? Because we have enough calories to both fuel the physical activity and maintain our essential energy expenditure. So it might be a little bit complicated, but that's my, view of this. And then a few years later, I wrote a second blog post that actually went into this further because Ponzer himself put a paper that essentially said the same thing. So I'm not going to deep dive into this blog post. You can read it. The second blog post is a follow up here. It was called "So Exercise is Not Pointless," follow up to my first one. And in this paper, essentially what we see from Ponzer is that, and actually I think I quoted him somewhere. I thought I wrote a quote in here, but maybe not. I'll explain basically in detail. Yeah. Essentially, he starts to talk about total energy expenditure differs based on whether you're in a negative energy balance or at energy maintenance or in a energy surplus. Meaning, if you are taking in less calories than you are burning, you're in a constrained model of energy expenditure. And that's what this first graph is showing here. We start to see this trend line going down here of total energy expenditure as physical activity goes up. When you're in maintenance, again, we have this nice trend line and it follows things for the most part. You're in maintenance, the more energy use you expend physical activity, the more calories you burn, a nice even slope. But that slope gets even steeper when you start to say when you're in energy surplus, right? So you're eating more calories than you're burning and you're expending more energy. You start to see this caloric burn rate start to ramp up really fast, right? And you start to burn more calories for more physical activity. So it's only in the state where you're in negative energy balance where your energy expenditure becomes constrained. And where do you think the Hadza fit in? They fit in here. This is where they fit in. Where is most of Western society? Over here. We're clearly we have a problem with eating more calories than we can burn, and people are obese, etc., and overweight, and that number is getting worse and worse. And so we're sitting here. So the more physical activity these people do, the more calories they are going to burn because they already are sitting in a caloric surplus. And even if they got them down to maintenance, it'd still be somewhat additive. Exercise is not pointless for weight loss, right? Even Ponzer shows it in this data. And we have to take into a context the population that we were talking about. Are we talking about a hunter-gatherer tribe eating whole natural foods, expending a lot of energy to get those foods and have access to very few calories? Or are we talking about the average Westerner who is overweight or obese, has plenty of calories coming in, way more than they need, and needs to actually shed a few pounds? And in that case, it's beneficial for that person to do a little bit more physical activity because it's going to help balance them out or at least bring them back down to maintenance, where it's probably not beneficial for the Hadza to do any more physical activity because they're already pretty low in calories to begin with and they don't need any more they don't really have any more to burn. So it's really all about context, right? And I just want to touch on one last thing, that exercise, especially for the people who are in the Western society, provides a whole bunch of other things that can contribute to weight loss. It improves sleep, right? And sleep is improving weight loss. It contributes to the maintenance and growth of lean mass. And lean mass is very important for weight loss. We want to have more lean mass. We want to have less. fat mass, improves your hormone profile, it regulates your appetite so you don't eat as much. It's a great facilitator of social connection and social support, which is important for weight loss. It can improve your mental health. It can improve your cardiovascular health. It makes you capable in everyday life, right? These are all extremely important things that indirectly contribute to greater weight loss and at least weight maintenance. I think that if we are talking to a Western society and we're talking about the benefits of exercise, there's plenty of reasons to exercise that have nothing to do with weight loss. But I think if weight loss is your goal, there's plenty of reasons for you also to exercise that actually have to do with weight loss. And maybe I'm not saying that additive model is completely correct. There's also research actually that Michael Easter points out here. He has a nice little graph from a paper that shows the predicted caloric burn versus the actual caloric burn of exercise, right? You can see here, the black line is what was predicted by doing that amount of exercise, but the red is what was actually burnt in reality. So there is a difference between if your watch says it was predicted you burned 500 calories, maybe you burned 250 calories. Maybe it's a 50% less difference, right? There's definitely going to be a difference. I'm not saying that this additive model is 100% true. It's certainly probably not the case, but it's probably somewhere in between. And it's not that exercise is completely pointless. And it's not that the additive model is completely true, but somewhere in the middle, exercise is probably beneficial for weight loss. I hope you found this useful. I think it's a useful topic. I probably rambled more than I wanted to, but maybe you find me talking about it a little bit more easier to consume the information than having to read my blog posts. And yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts. What do you think about this? How do you factor exercise when it comes to weight loss? Do you even consider it at all? Let me know. Happy to know. Happy to hear your opinion and what you thought. And as always, if you like my content that I'm putting out, please go to my webpage. It's RJB Health, rjbhealth.coach. And right at the top here, you'll see a newsletter link. You can click that newsletter link. Enter your email address here is sign up for the newsletter, and I will email you every time I post blog posts like this or do videos like this or anything else. And that way it comes right to your inbox and you don't have to wait for me to try to search for it online. And if you are interested in coaching and you need help with a weight loss or any other health struggle that you might be having, please, again, go to the homepage, click apply to work one-on-one with me, fill out the form here, and you'll definitely, I'll get back to you and we can chat a little bit more about coaching one-on-one. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you all next week.